If you want to improve your YouTube videos, one of the most important things to think about is audience retention. And here are going to be 10 tips to keep people watching for longer that are going to be applying to both smaller and bigger channels. Also, this is part 1 of a series of videos that are aimed to help you grow your YouTube channel. Tip number 1. Side angles shouldn't be overused in talking head videos. When making talking head videos, a lot of people rely on the 2-camera setup, where you have one frontal camera and one side camera, mainly capturing the side of the face. However, most creators who do have the setup rely too heavily on this side camera. This makes it that we have less connection with the host, as the frontal camera is aimed to connect with the host. So here's the right way to use a 2-camera setup and when you should cut to the side angle. First, whenever you notice that you have a lot of hard, rough cuts in your video, then you can use the side camera angle to hide those rough cuts. This is a great way to make the video feel smoother. Second, you can use that side angle to break up a frontal shot that tends to last too long. And to give you an idea, if we go on a frontal shot for way too long, let's say 5 to 10 seconds, we know that the viewer may get bored of the visuals that we're showing. In this case, we could use that second camera angle as a means to make it visually exciting. And third, one of the biggest things about these side camera angles, if you just did an animated explanation and you have to get back to either your frontal shot or your side camera angle, use your frontal shot. It will feel more aggressive, but it is way better at reconnecting the audience with you. Tip number 2. Give regular reminders to what's at stake, especially in entertainment content. In a typical video on YouTube, at the beginning of the video we tend to provide a lot of context. We tell them what the video is about, we give some context to understand the video, and often we set a goal. However, we have to understand that the viewer doesn't always remember this unless we remind them at regular intervals. So if you say your goal in the beginning of the video, but you don't mention it until 5 minutes, the viewer may have actually already forgotten about that. For this reason, we introduce reminders at regular intervals to the viewer. But here's the kicker. When we give reminders to the viewers, we actually do not have to give them at very consistent intervals. What we actually want to do is we want to space these reminders further and further away as the video progresses. While most people think a reminder is about giving it at 2 minutes, 4 minutes, 6 minutes, 8 minutes, what you actually have to do is give a reminder at 2 minutes, then at 5 minutes, then maybe one at 9 minutes, then at 15 minutes. And as you can see, the spacing gets larger because as we remind the viewer more and more, they're going to be better at remembering this. And yes, this can be the difference between a video performing very well and not. Tip number 3. Keep explanation scenes short. Now this advice may change a little depending on if you have an entertainment channel or an educational channel, but we're going to cover both. So let's begin with entertainment channels. Exposition scenes are scenes where we focus on giving a lot of context rather than delivering on the content itself. However, these scenes are not that great at keeping people engaged, as they're so context driven and people didn't sign up for the context. For that reason, the strategy we found to be most efficient is to simply reduce the length of these scenes and stretch the length of the scenes that are really what people come for. So if you give an explanation, keep it short, keep it brief, simple language, and visualize it so that the viewer just gets what they need, and then we move on to the content they actually came for. Now, if you're an educational channel, well, everything is about an explanation. But in this case, we have to think about, okay, when are you giving explanation that is aimed to educate the audience, or when are you just overly explaining with a lot of information that is actually not as relevant? So this is where the viewer is going to decide whether information is important to their new understanding or not. Tip number 4, singular goals tend to perform better than multiple goals. Now this one may be a little bit more complicated, so I'm going to try to explain it through an example as well. But what I'm going to demonstrate to you is that many creators set double goals even if they're unaware of it. And you may also do this one, I don't know. Take a look at this. In today's video, we're going to look at 10 ways to keep your audience engaged using only visualization techniques. And by the end of it, not only will you be able to improve your channel's content, but also increase the amount of views per video. So when we look back at this intro, do you notice how there's actually 2 goals instead of 1? The first goal is to improve the channel's content, and the second one is to increase the views. By putting it like this, not only is the intro less impactful, but the viewer will have a way harder time to focus on which goal is more important. So let's take a look at what happens when we remove one of those goals and feel the impact difference of these 2 intro sentences. And by the end of it, you should be able to improve your channel's content and increase the amount of views per video. And by the end of it, you should be able to increase the amount of views per video. Now, do you see how one is more impactful than the other just by removing one of the goals? Now again, the second goal could become part of the journey, but not in the initial seconds of the intro. That's not when we establish that extra goal. Tip number 5, choose the right kind of music to evoke emotion. Background music like rock music, corporate music, or any of the generic types of music that people tend to use are actually not that good for retention. The reason is because they don't evoke a very clear emotion. So to make the watch experience for viewers a lot more memorable and emotionally resonant, we want to choose tracks with a clear emotional undertone. So here I'm going to give you examples for both entertainment channels and educational channels. So let's take a scene from a video game, and let's see what happens when you play some rock music under it. While you felt like it was very action-packed, right, you didn't feel the suspense emotion as you would feel with a cinematic track. So here's that exact same clip, but instead of the rock music, we're gonna use something more suspenseful, cinematic, and you will literally feel that it's going to be more impactful towards you. You see, one makes you feel something very obvious and the other, it's unclear how you're actually supposed to emotionally feel. Now let's do the same for some educational content and see what happens when you place corporate music under it. When making talking head videos, a lot of people rely on the 2-camera setup, where you have one frontal camera and one side camera, mainly capturing the side of the face. And let's change that to tension. When making talking head videos, a lot of people rely on the 2-camera setup, where you have one frontal camera and one side camera, mainly capturing the side of the face. Same thing again, corporate music doesn't really convey a clear emotion. However, if you put a suspenseful music on it, you see how suddenly you feel excited? That's what music can do to content. Tip number 6 is avoid double jokes. The way a story progresses towards its next point is often crucial in order to keep people engaged. If you progress too fast, people get confused. If you progress too slow, people get bored. But if you make a joke, then we tend to stall progression. And because of that, if we do multiple jokes or a double joke, then we stall progression for sometimes too long. That's why we often decide to do a progressive scene, then a joke, then a progressive scene, then a joke, then a progressive scene. This way we keep the content light, but we also don't stall progression. Tip number 7, establish authority. In a lot of educational content, it's actually important to establish content to make sure that the viewer believes what you're saying is good information. And in order to do so, we tend to use specialized language in the first minute of the video, as this helps establish to the viewer, hey, this person isn't just somebody who's talking about this for the first time. This makes you look like an authority figure right away. However, make sure if you use specialized language that viewers who don't understand this language can still understand it through the context cues. Tip number 8. Use the right shot sizing with your camera. This counts for both educational and entertainment content, but if you're using your camera, whether you use a close-up zoom or you're going a little further away, think about what you're trying to convey to the viewer. If you want to establish context to the situation where we're at, then take a wide shot. If you want something more neutral, then you can do a medium shot or something what you're seeing right here. But if you really want the viewer to focus on the emotion, then you want to zoom in a lot more. Tip number 9. Use little fun sound effects in educational content. Adding short, funny sound effects to educational videos isn't just something that makes it look cheaper if you do it right. In fact, what it does do is make the content lighter, even though it may sometimes be very serious. This will make it more enjoyable for a lot of people who aren't there for all the serious information. It's a nice balance between softer, lighter scenes and heavier information-packed scenes. And if you want to see how this feels, well, scroll back through the video and see how many little sound effects the editor added here and there in order to make this video more enjoyable. I promise this isn't the way to make you rewatch the video or anything like that. And tip number 10 is someone's liking shouldn't have you break retention rules. Often I notice that creators tend to stretch scenes or allow for scenes to breathe more just because they have a famous person in their videos. But it won't necessarily hold retention as well for many reasons. Maybe some of your audience doesn't like this person and doesn't want to see them more than necessary. Or they just aren't crucial to this specific video as this video isn't about them. In those cases, you'll often see retention losses simply because we stay too long on our guest. So always stay focused on keeping the retention rules going no matter how relevant the guest is. Now these are just a few of the retention tips that I thought to share in this first video, but there's going to be many more in this series. These are all going to be meant to help you with your retention, and just pick and choose whichever you want to apply. I'm not going to blame you if you don't implement 100% of those, just know the losses that you may suffer from them. Thank you all for watching, and I'll add the playlist here that you can watch with the other ones.